I would like to call us to order in accordance with Code of Laws, South Carolina Code of Laws, 1985, Section 30-4-80-E. The following have been notified of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting. The Herald, the Charlotte Observer, CN2, and WRHI. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you would, please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. And we'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You have all received a copy of the agenda. Were there any adjustments or corrections? If not, that will stand approved with unanimous consent. Ms. Pettis, do we have any public participation? We do not tonight. Okay. Then we're going to jump right in. We got several staff reports. We'll start off with a budget update from Ms. Leanne Lorgo.
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight I'm going to give you an update on where we are on the local general fund budget. At the last meeting, we discussed in detail the expenditure side, and I expressed to you that based on some very quick math, I thought that we could make this work on the revenue side. So I want to walk through that with you this evening. The budget that plan that you see and the board members you've seen in your packet is based on the Senate projections. I pretty much started over and rebuilt based on the Senate projections. I will share that I did not listen to the meeting, but last week the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, I have read that they reported out to the Economic Board of Advisors that South Carolina is still on track to collect more tax revenue. I saw one article that stated it was at a level of $421 million, so that the General Assembly is still planning to return in June to complete their budget. So we're very hopeful that the Senate projections would not be lowered, so I felt comfortable in using that those allocations to build our plan as best we know it at this point. But I don't expect that we will see decreases because of what we're hearing about the economic status in the state. As far as what changed since you saw the revenue plan based on the House Ways and Means, which was way back in March. So if you look at these numbers, property taxes I have updated through actual collections for April. So I took actual collections this year through April, added in what we collected last May and June, applied a 3% growth rate, which is the same growth rate we used for the budget this current year. And as I've reported, that has been favorable for us. And then I've applied the allowable millage increase based on the Act 388 formula, which I had reported out to you at the previous meeting was 11.1 mils. So all of that combined would generate an additional $8,052,933 of tax, new tax revenue, and that equates to a value of a mill of $312,000. We're currently at about, we budgeted $275, we're in the 280s. So this would be an increase up to $312,000 per value of a mill.
And you mentioned a 3% growth rate. Does the fact that we went through a revaluation last year have any impact on that?
A slight impact, but the formula for reassessment is that we do not receive additional tax revenue because a taxpayer's value increases. But the 3% is as a result of this continued growth that we've seen on our tax roll. So we have seen some new business come on. We've seen a few new fee in lieu agreements come on. So that has really accounted for the 3% growth.
So it's really about net new payers.
Correct.
As opposed to an increased property value.
Correct. Absolutely.
So just for acute clarity, that
Sure.
3% growth rate again comes from where?
3% growth rate comes from new properties coming on the tax roll, new businesses, new vehicles, new rental properties, new boats, those type of properties. Not homes, because we don't collect operational millage on homes, but it's all the other properties in the Fort Mill TDK Township that go on the tax roll for us.
It is apartments.
Sure.
Because
It
they're
is
considered a
apartments,
commercial
great
business.
point, absolutely. Any type of rental/lease type housing units
Thank you, ma'am.
would be in that number. So, when we use 3%, I guess, in the past couple years, we thought that was a pretty conservative number, and I think that has sort of been a good plan for us with what happened this past year. And we were able to weather the storm with the uncertainty of the pandemic and collections. So I would recommend we stay with 3%. It may come in at 4%. We've seen it come in at 5 and 6% in some prior years. But 3% is still a relatively conservative number for what we're anticipating that could happen here in our community. The other items of local source income are relatively small in comparison. We're just with the market, we're not seeing interest income coming in as we would have expected. Tuition, we have about a dozen families paying tuition to us. And then rental other, we just have a small piece of that in our general fund. So total local revenue, I'm projecting at $90,265,953, or a net increase of $7.8 million.
Ms. Lorda, when you
Sure.
talk about rental, are you talking about facility rental, or what do you mean by rental?
Some of it, not facility rental, because we account for that separately. These are a few of the cell tower arrangements that we have. Now, one of those large ones we pulled out, and we've been using it toward our Discovery Ed, but this is another small one. As far as the state revenue, what changed since you have seen this? The Senate projections are based on a base student cost of $2,516 versus an even $2,500. The teacher salary numbers and the fringe benefits, they adjusted slightly based on our final staffing counts, that data. They've been very slow to update that this year, so we finally saw some adjustments with that. Because remember, we always start the year, they allocate based on the prior year. And so it takes this long for the state to do the final adjustments for us. But the big item here is state aid teacher salary. This is the line where they have put the teacher salary step for next year and the $1,000 per sale increase on the teacher salary schedule. So those two things combined, our allocation increased to $5,364,000, or new revenue for us would be $1,896,000, rounded. And I will point out, because we'll talk about this when we talk about year-end transfers, but on EFA, you'll see that we are expecting to not receive what we've budgeted this year because we've seen that decrease in student count, not knowing if we're going to receive all those new students back in 1 year, or it might take 2 years for those students to come back. So the increase of $1,478,000 is based on our projected enrollment plan for next year at the $2,516 for 800 new students for next year. So the total new state revenue would be $5,384,022. The last piece is we receive a small amount of federal funding for the junior ROTC program. It's pretty much stable there. And then I was able to keep the contingency for next year at the $5,250,000 without needing to increase that. So the total proposed budget that we would recommend for the general fund next year is $177,624,512, and that's based on new revenue of $13,225,788. And if you see the line on student ADM, that is based on 18,366 students next year.
So can we talk about that for a second?
Sure.
So the projection when we started, when we set the budget, was going to be 7,858, right? That's what we thought
Correct.
we were going to have. This 16,729.
Is where we are on the 135-day count for average daily membership.
I actually thought it was higher than that in the numbers that we've been doing through our enrollment.
Well, this is average daily membership.
Daily membership's a different number
Okay,
than the
I'm
real,
with you now.
Correct.
real bodies
Yep.
and seats.
Okay,
It's a mathematical computation.
yeah.
It's
Okay.
not real
Based
big.
on the percentage of how many students attend each day.
Well, okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I know.
We always have
confusing.
some
Yeah.
level of absenteeism, but to go from 16,729 to 18,366, you mentioned 800, but it's actually 1,600.
Correct. It's 800 new, plus assuming that we are going to re-enroll those students who currently have elected various options such as charter school, homeschool. Virtual is counted.
I guess my question is, what risk are we running if we forecast as high as 18,366 and that doesn't come to fruition?
Well, that, I've accounted for that in the year end. So
Okay.
let's keep going and we'll circle back on that one. On the expenditure side, we went into detail on these line items at the prior meeting, but I just wanted to share with you a few changes since we met. Probably the biggest change has been on items 6 and 7 for the 40 new classroom teachers and the positions for the opening of Forest Creek Middle School. That does include some overhead costs, but just as far as the positions, we have gone back and readjusted those numbers based on the actual hires to date and where they would place on the salary schedules. That's very tight, but we know where they will place, and so we have readjusted those numbers down for that variance. The other couple small changes, I did apply on line 3. I shared with you the last meeting that the South Carolina School Board's Insurance Trust was offering a loyalty credit or coupon against premiums next year. And so I have reduced that number to account for the credit that they will be offsetting our premium due on the employer workers' comp. And then under instructional or network engineering licensing, that did increase about $7,000. We are moving to a new platform for our employee self-service where employees can log on, look at their pay, print their W-2s, look at their leave balances. And this new enhanced system is going to require us to assign all employees a district email. And we currently did not have bus drivers and cafeteria were able to use a personal email. But with this system, they have to have a district email. And so we're going to have to add that into our licensing. And so Mr. Spittle and I had worked on that, and we adjusted that number slightly just to make sure we have that accounted for. And the last thing is we've confirmed the cleaning contract, which is a large contract for us. We have confirmed the exact amount, where before we had estimated it. Back in February, we confirmed the exact amount, especially with Forest Creek Middle coming on. And so we made a slight adjustment on the cleaning cost for next year to make sure we had that accounted for. So I was able to balance this. It was almost a little scary how it came together for the revenue that we have available. So,
Question for, oh, I'm sorry.
sure, no, I was happy about that.
So back to number 8. So you
Yes.
mentioned that it was a little tight. Does that mean you're uncomfortable?
I'm not uncomfortable. It's just normally we have the ability going into the fall where we know that new hires, some will come in over the budgeted amount, some will come in under, depending on their experience levels. We usually don't budget to the exact number like this. But we just, and I've shared with everyone, I've said, you know, we're going to have to work through this next year. We won't have the ability to come in and add a lot of new people come August. We've already made that adjustment.
Thank you.
Leanne, because you normally use what, a 10-year?
We use a teacher at 10 years experience at a master's degree, which is right in the middle of the teacher pay
You
scale.
get someone with 5 years, it's less. You get someone with 15 years, it's more. And so that's where she's adjusted for the
Right.
real numbers.
Got it. Thank you.
And we normally just don't adjust at this point. But because of what I saw with what the Senate did with the $1,000 increase and all, I had to adjust it for us to balance and not have to increase that contingency amount. That was my goal, was to not have to depend more on that one-time money.
Thank you.
Okay? And then I did not make any changes to this, but I am going to talk about this on the year-end transfer. This would be our current balance in our new school opening contingency funds. We are pulling in the $5,250,000 this year for the opening of Kingstown and River Trail. And then next year, we would also pull in $5.2 million out of the $10 million balance that we will have at June. So that would give us roughly one more year, 22, 23, to build this into the general fund.
And this doesn't show the previous year, but we also brought in 4 or 5 million for Catawba Ridge at the time.
Correct, correct. This just starts with what we have done this year.
But just for the,
Correct, yeah.
sort of sake of history, that's,
Right. What we generally have done is in the year that a school opens, we will bring in the cost of that school, and then we'll absorb it in the next year's budget. Here, we aren't fully able to absorb quite the full amount for Kingstown and River Trail because it was 2 schools coming on in 1 year. So it's going to take us 1 more year in addition to opening a middle school next year.
so the 5.2 that you're pulling, that you're recommending to pull in for this coming year
Right,
is 3.2 new for Forest Creek and about 2
for the
that
other
we're
2.
still having
Yes.
to deal with from River Trail
Correct.
and Kingstown.
Correct. But hopefully with next year being a year that we will not open a school, we will be able to absorb some of this from our growth and revenue.
And still leave roughly 5 million in the
Remaining.
contingency, because we know that
Correct,
there's another school on the horizon at some point in time.
correct, yes. The public budget hearing has been advertised for June the 8th. We ran 1 ad to be in compliance with the 15-day requirement, and we will run it again over the weekend prior to June 8th, whatever those dates. We run it twice.
For the benefit of the board, we talked at one point about what time we would do that meeting. Leanne had already moved forward
I
with our
had.
normal 6 o'clock time, so we were going with the normal 6 o'clock
Yeah.
time for that, because
For
it's
the
already
June-
been noticed that way.
For the June 8th meeting?
For the June 8th.
Correct.
6 o'clock, just like we always do.
Yes. We had already hit the button and sent that in
That's fine.
for the ad, so. Okay. The other piece outside of our budget that I was going to share is we are, all of our various departments, we are continuing to work on learning about the requirements for ESSER 3. I had shared with you some of our preliminary thoughts about what we may put in those funds. I will tell you that there is more compliance required, and we're continuing to all learn that as we listen to these webinars. There's going to be some requirements of things that have to be posted on our website. The application is going to be more extensive. It will have to be tied to our academic recovery plan. There may be some policies that we bring to you that we need to add or tweak. So we are working through that. We have to submit our application by August 24th. But some of these requirements of things we have to post on our website, we have to post by June 24th. So we are still very much in the middle of working through that ESSER 3 funding.
Are there any concerns you have thus far, going through the
No,
exercise?
we're just trying to, because this is federal money, and it seems to even have more attachments to it than other federal money we receive. There's just a lot of things to check off and make sure that you have, because we're being told these funds will be audited just because of the magnitude of the dollars coming to South Carolina. Now, whether they will pick us, I do not know. I don't think we're going to be a big fish out there with our $5 million, but it could be a random selection.
Miss, after you.
I did a webinar yesterday, I think it was, about that, and there was something that was happening on May 24th.
May 24th, we received the grant award notification,
Final
what they call the
official
GAN,
number.
for 2/3 of the amount.
Okay.
So it's coming in two pieces, 2/3 of the amount and then the remaining 1/3.
Okay.
And so that was May 24th. So the website requirements that we will be working on have to be posted 30 days after that date, and that's where they get June 24th.
Ms. Lorda, if the, this board has the option to raise the budget up to the 11.1, it doesn't have to, right?
Correct.
So if the board decided not to raise it to the 11.1 and go with something less than that, what recommendations would you bring instead?
I would think we would have to pull more out of the contingency for next year, because looking at what we have proposed on the list of expenditures are all what we call priority one things, with the increase in contracts based on staffing, based on number of students, the maintenance requirements. I have already recalculated the position cost to the exact numbers. I think we would just have to go to the contingency for additional funds for next year.
What when of these line items would be, I mean, some of these are non-discretionary, right? There's nothing you can do about some of these expenses. They're
Down
gonna
to
go.
about 8, right?
Right.
Is 8 kind of where the cutoff is?
Well,
9 through
9
16?
and 10, these are contracts that are currently in place, like Microsoft, all of the curriculum-related software, that are existing contracts that in order to renew them, when you renew, we have to give current counts. And so these are a combination of probably a dozen different contracts that we have, either on the instructional technology side or the network engineering, that pretty much cash out the door, that if we maintain those contracts or licensing. Utilities and cleaning, that is a given with, I will share with you that bringing on Catawba Ridge High School, the utility cost for a high school exceeded our expectations. It is such a large facility that we have to make sure that we're covering the monthly utility bills. And that was a large increase in our monthly utility budget, bringing on the high school. Same thing with the cleaning contract, and we're bringing on another middle school. The 12th one is the property insurance on our facilities and the communications cost with the whole telephone communication system that we have. Same thing with 13 with maintenance, repairs, supplies, and contracted services. We have gone through all of the maintenance accounts I have with Mr. Romanek, with Mr. Taylor in detail, and looked at our actual costs this year and trying to make sure we are projecting accurately for next year. So I feel very good about those numbers. There's not cushion built into those numbers. Their asks were greater than this, but these are the absolute dollars. Because with maintenance and repairs, something happens in a school, you have to go out and fix it or buy the part or buy the service for what needs to be done. So that one is always very difficult to estimate, so we always look at the actual in the current year to plan for the next year.
So is the real discretionary part, items number 6 and 7, that we discussed and went ahead and gave guidance on, I don't know, however many months ago,
January.
because it was based on projected number of students and therefore class sizes and increased numbers of teachers and all that, right?
Correct. Probably more the 40 new classroom teachers. Planning for the growth that we can't really, if that number's too tight and we get to August and all these new students do come, that's a very difficult number to project. But we think we put ourselves in a very good position now because we've gotten the best hires, we're prepared, even if we're prepared probably for 2 years if they don't all come back in next year.
We're addressing Brian's question of
Right.
if we didn't want to increase the mill that much, as opposed to reducing something here, I think the option is, because the biggest items to reduce would be teachers we've already now hired,
Correct.
right?
So-
And so it would be
Right.
more a matter of pulling from contingency instead.
Is that 40 number based on the 18,366 projected enrollment that you're projecting?
It was.
So if those don't come, we'll have a lower student-teacher ratio? Is that the
Correct.
answer there?
And hopefully, the
Correct.
thinking is next year, we won't have to do 40.
Or what?
We will not have to do
Right.
40 next
Or
year.
more.
Yeah.
40 more.
40 more.
Well, you've got those folks that are going to be hired under the ESSER funds that we're going to need to reabsorb into the budget as well. So you might have,
In year 3. So
year
with
3.
the ESSER funds, we only put the positions that we had enough money to fund for 2 years. And same with ESSER 3. So that gives us, next year, we're not opening a school. We hopefully will be in good shape with the number of teachers. I'm not saying we won't have to hire any teachers, but we probably won't hire 40. That will give us opportunity to pull some of this back in.
But ESSER 3.
And then
we have
ESSER
2
3,
years
we actually have 3 years, correct.
to absorb.
So we tried to be careful how many positions. I mean, the staff will tell you how many times I said that. You know, we got to be careful. We got to be careful. But you almost have to use those ESSER funds to help supplement because the state is banking. When the state was discussing their budget, they continually said all the school districts are receiving so much federal money that they didn't feel the need to increase the base student costs more than the 2516. And I think that's our challenge, is that they are not building it into their recurring dollars for next year, but they do recognize that at some point the federal funds will be exhausted. And so all districts will have positions and have recurring costs in these federal funds that they will have to move back into their recurring general fund.
Which is a huge ordeal if districts put, those who have tons of dollars, do a lot of staff in their dollars.
Correct.
Now, maybe they won't use it for staff, I don't know, but, when I looked at some of the districts around us that are multiple times the amount of money, even though they have, what's the opposite of multiple? Much less number of students, right? Districts that
Yes.
have half the number of students
Yes.
got 4 times the dollars,
Correct.
right? So if they
Correct.
build those in as staff, that will be a much bigger challenge for those districts.
It will be. But I think we are at a good balance on that, of how we, at least how we applied ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. And as I said, we're still, the largest chunk of ESSER 3 for us will not be for positions. It will be for facility upgrades. So we won't have, it's mainly the positions that we have committed in ESSER 2. But we will have that funding for 2 years.
So how much would you recommend to remain in the contingency fund? And I guess another question is, jumping ahead a little bit, I know you have some year-end transfers for revenue that exceeded budget. Why not go ahead and allocate some of that towards the additional expenses for next year?
It's an accounting thing, but really we are, because at year end, my recommendation is that we pull it out of the general fund, even if it's temporary, because we don't need our general fund balance to increase more than our target. So we're going to pull it out, and then we're going to use it for next year. And my thought is that's available to us if we don't see that full amount of 18,366 students all come back in August, that we know we've got that additional increase in the contingency to go to for next year, was my thinking on that.
If we have that number of students and we need to increase expenses for, so if we had that number of students come in, what would be the?
If we have that number of students, we are fine, because we've accounted for the teachers that we need for that number of students. If they don't come in, we have almost pre-planned ourselves for the next budget, but we have that revenue to pull back in to cover us next year.
Which goes back to at what level of contingency fund are you recommending?
I don't know that there is a set amount. I think that from an audit standpoint and working with the auditors, they want to see you pulling money out, because that is specifically designed for the opening of new schools. And so they want to see you pulling it out and using it for the opening of new schools. It is not intended just to accumulate in an endless, infinite amount. They want to see how we are directly using it in our planning for the new schools. So I think it is positive for them. It will be a positive audit point that how we are budgeting this and how we're pulling it into our general fund.
'Cause you're basically pulling out, what was it, 5.25 and
5.2.
putting in 1.8.
Correct.
Is your recommendation.
Correct.
Which is customary to what we've traditionally done over the last many years. Because it also goes to our bond rating and how we look when we go out to bond, when we're buying and selling all these public money for building schools and whatnot. If we don't have this contingency fund sitting here, our ratings are gonna go down.
Well, we have other contingency funds for bond payments,
We
right?
do, but it all factors into how we get looked at as a district for buying money.
To me, one of the things that I recall prior to being here, but when you and I were out there selling the need for more schools, is that there was a time, not that many years ago, that the problem was not the bond to build the school, but it was the funds to open it.
That's
And we ran into that in the community
Yeah.
with people who had that kind of a memory that said, how do I, how in the world, without our state stepping up any additional dollars, how in the world are we gonna be able to open this school and operate it? And the answer was, well, we've been really good about having this contingency, and we've now had a process. And so, I don't remember off the top of my head how many schools were in the forecast for the next 10 years, but sadly, I remember it was more than one.
Yeah.
Probably more than two, maybe more than three, I don't know. So, yeah, Wayne can't just hold up your fingers, but, but, having 5 million left causes me a little pause.
Me too.
But, to see it in 2 years go from 15 to 5 is a pretty steep drop.
That was the
But
plan though, right?
It was.
It was.
But also what this doesn't reflect, while we're gonna do that 5.2, we're putting some back in. So this doesn't
Right.
really reflect.
Right.
So while this says
7.
at 21, we're gonna be down to 5.
I didn't assume that you would support that, so I didn't put that number in here.
Support what?
Moving the additional 1.8,
The transfers.
Oh,
the
yeah.
transfers.
We haven't
So,
Voted on it
yeah,
yet, so she
yeah,
didn't wanna-
yeah,
But I read ahead, so same
Yeah.
thing. So it takes it back up to closer to 7. which is-
correct. We'll be close to 7,
But not much.
yes.
Well, it goes back to what should the number be, right?
But
And
this
so-
is just, remember, this is not our general fund balance.
Right.
We
but it-
also have our general fund balance, which very much comes into play when we go to the bond market. And that's really the number that the bond rating agencies discuss,
Is which number?
is our general fund balance, which we maintain at about 19%. We're required by your policy to maintain it at 16%. So we go a little over on that. But that's a number you can be criticized if that number gets too high. So you don't want to be in a situation, there's a happy medium there, and we're consistent with it. And that's what's very positive when I have these bond ratings calls, is the consistency of the general fund balance, and that it's not fluctuating up and down significantly. So that's intact. This has just been our side plan for helping with the operational hits when we open schools. I mean, we opened a high school, we opened 2 elementaries in the same year, and now a middle.
Or middle runs 3.5.
3.5,
3 for an elementary, 3.5 for a middle, something like that, right? So if you figure you've got a couple on the horizon, 7 sounds like a
Yeah,
reasonable number.
Right,
I just think we
right.
need to be clear about the trade-offs for raising the operational mills 11 up
Right.
to the max.
Well,
what
and
do you-
remember, I
what's the
think
long-term
that
plan?
we will be, I think, putting out a public announcement about this, but, this is a great opportunity for us with the successful completion of the impact fee lawsuit. And I can tell you that we will be rolling back debt millage. It will exceed that 11.1 mils, so that our taxpayers would not see a tax increase. So for that reason, in this year of the benefit of those impact fees, I would hate to see you not take advantage of the full capacity of the Act 388 formula, because other districts will be setting their millage based on that formula. And once you don't set it at that amount, you can't go back and pick that up.
It's kind of like compounded daily interest.
Absolutely.
You don't compound it daily, you don't
No.
get it.
Working backwards.
School funding is ridiculously complex and not helpful to actually running a school district. No question about that. In that plan, the expectation, I think, for taxpayers is that taxes go down, especially with the success of the impact fee.
Correct.
Well, and let's just be honest, most people, I'm very thankful that you were here, Ms. Lordo, because you understand this and your team understand this to the T and have all the detail, and I'm very thankful for that. Most folks don't understand the 2 buckets of money.
Right.
I mean, general buckets, large buckets, right? There's a ton of buckets, right? Buckets
Right.
everywhere. And so I think most people will expect that. So does this plan, I know you said not go up, but maybe I'll ask you a little bit, push you a little bit on that.
So we try our best to, I think, even though these two buckets are very different and the setting of the millage has very different requirements, we do try to work those in conjunction for the benefit of the taxpayers in any given year. Sometimes, just depending on the amount of debt that's coming due or the needs in the general fund, it doesn't always work that way, but it has worked that way to the advantage of our taxpayers here for the last couple years. And that's our plan for next year as well.
So, is it fair to say, we have two pretty dramatically different populations? We have residents, who will not see this increase except for on a car, but will see whatever the decrease is
Correct.
on their home and their car. So they're gonna see whatever size drop in the big tax bill, which is their home, and they're gonna see whatever net drop there is on their boat or their car, which will be a smaller dollar amount regardless because it's a boat or a car.
Correct.
Then you have businesses who have both sides, and so they will feel whatever the net difference is between the increase here and the decrease in debt services.
Yes.
And so your plan is for them to feel a negative net change.
Correct.
Okay. Even though
Correct.
we haven't gotten to the point of
Right.
confirming the dollars and mills and
Right.
amounts on that, but I know you've been working with bond attorneys. on
Right. It
what's-
will be a net
what the
decrease.
options are there.
It will be a net decrease.
And then, and then it goes, if we had, and we don't, if we had, the 10-year plan said, yeah, you're good, you don't need any schools, we would have no business
Keep
having a
it
$7 million contingency fund.
Correct. And the auditors would question why we had that.
In addition, we all should here.
Yes. So it's
what-
a very short term, if you can think of it this way, this is a short-term solution for opening so many schools so quickly to offset the limited amount of revenue, new revenue that you can generate in the general fund.
Because it's a negative cash flow cycle.
Absolutely.
So what, is 7 million the right number? Is that the right number considering we're gonna build X number of schools in the next 10 years? And I'm confident that you've looked at that math.
Well, I don't think that the auditors would support us building up for something so far in the future. I think they have worked with us on this, even though this bothers them a little bit. They have worked with us on this plan because they have seen us adding to it, taking away, adding to it, taking away, and they've seen us actively using these funds versus just building up a balance.
When you say it bothers them, what do you mean by that?
It's not a special revenue fund in the truest sense of a special revenue fund where there's not a third-party restriction. It's more of an accounting type issue that there's not a third-party restriction on these funds. It's governed by your direction
Got it, yep.
internally. It's not like a grant coming in, let's say, or some other type of state allocation.
Well, and in the case of the funds that we usually transfer at the end of the year, it's not because we didn't hire enough staff or we skimped on this or we skimped on that. It's the revenue came in higher than what was projected because more cars came on, because more
Correct.
people moved here and are paying more in those different sales tax arenas that we received more. It wasn't because we were cutting and carving things.
Correct.
But we're also not budgeting excessively, because if you budget excessively and you don't have this fund to carry over, you have no way to pay for what you've now overspent.
And I would, with $1.8 million or whatever the number is that's left over, it sounds like, oh my gosh, we had all this money left over.
Right, it's not that
It's a 1% miss. I wouldn't
Yeah.
want you to budget
Right.
any tighter.
know.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I would not want to
because
budget any
imagine if
tighter.
it was a 1%
mind.
miss in the other direction,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
So, you know, the difference between 167 and 164 of actual versus budget is really quite tight.
Good job.
Thank you. It's a lot of luck. It's a lot of luck.
Yeah, that too.
And one thing just came to mind that I'll remind you of. In the 2018 bond referendum, we do have a line item in that for a land purchase that was to repay this fund. Those of you that were on the board when you made that decision maybe
3 years ago.
3 years ago, we pulled out of this because we had an opportunity to buy a site prior to the referendum. And at the time the referendum plan was built, it was determined that we would repay this, the 2.1 million. So we do have that to pull back in here if we need to as well. So that would put us back at 9 million.
Is that the right number?
I don't know.
Yes, absolutely.
It is the right number.
It is if we have 2 to 3 schools
Yes.
in the near-term horizon, I would say.
Well, you got at least 3 in the near-term horizon.
Is that
Based
2
on the
elementaries in the
5-year plan.
middle? 2 elementaries in the middle, is that right?
That's correct.
Maybe 3.
That's minimum. We are, the challenge, you know, the whole thing causing all this is we're the fastest growing school district in the state and one of the fastest in the country. That's the root of the whole problem.
And
Absolutely.
our
The
local
challenge.
realtor tells us it's not slowing down anytime soon.
I think
At
the
all.
pandemic is going to only accelerate that for us. That's my gut. I don't know, I don't know if we get to the 18 whatever number, but I just, the sense of it says the pandemic will accelerate that trend.
Well, it already has, right? I mean, you know it. You sold a house in record time, right? They can't get on the market before they're sold. People want to be here.
Got one
It's a
I
beautiful
tried to show a
place.
client today, trying to schedule it. It's already under contract, coming soon, sight unseen. They're doing it every day. And they're doing it at well above asking price
Yep.
every day.
I mean, at some point that bubble will burst, but it's,
And new construction is doing the same thing. They're running a lottery for a lot. What will you pay for the lot? Oh, you'll pay 5,000 over, but she's gonna pay 10,000 over, and he's gonna pay 15, we're gonna give it to him.
That's right.
That's what they're doing.
And the reason for the question really is to make sure that, okay, is that the right decision? If you're going to raise the operational millage and raise that revenue, how do you answer the question? You have $7 million over here, right? In that we all understand that, because that's what we do need to understand in order to vote on it. That I appreciate all the information and all the answers that you give, and you know I appreciate the job that you do.
Sure.
And I'm very appreciative of your stewardship of the district's finances.
Well, I think the key is that we all recognize this is one-time type money. These operational costs that we're discussing with opening these schools is recurring. And the way I explain it to people, though, we can't raise enough revenue in a single year to offset that increase in the operational cost on top of needing to continue to hire the number of teachers that we need to for growth. And so it takes us a few years for that to somewhat level out. This has just hit us a little harder because we've had these 4 so close together.
Well, and really, if you really look at the whole district picture, it wasn't that long ago that we put Pleasant Knoll Middle on. We barely probably came up for air from Pleasant Knoll Middle before we added on Catawba Ridge High, and now 2 more elementaries
Right.
and another middle. So, yeah, 9,000 is the number, or million rather. Maybe it's 12 million, because if we're gonna do 3 more schools potentially, or 4 more schools in the next 4 to 7 years or less, I didn't really say that out loud. yeah, we're gonna need that money in there. And again, we're not building a slush fund because we haven't been doing the right things. It's a slush fund because build it and they will come, and they sure are.
Planning fund.
Okay. So we will move forward with these numbers for the public hearing unless you have concerns.
I mean, I
And-
look at the priority one needs, and that's where I say, I don't see anything on there that we can adjust down materially, especially given that we made the decision, and I think it was a very wise decision, to jump on the hiring early because of the numbers
Correct.
we have to hire.
Correct.
So now we need those teachers that we
Correct.
committed to.
And normally you would then see, these are our priority ones. You would then see our priority 2s and 3s. But what we did this year was move those things to those ESSER dollars, to those federal dollars. So this would still be our priority 1 list, and then those things would be our priority 2 list. And remember, the total list I shared with you was like $20 million. And that was before the $1,000 on the teacher salary scale. So I will update that and resend you so you'll have the new grand total number. So year-end transfers. I put in your packet a little detail, as I've done in prior years, of what generates that. And it does tie back to what you saw on these slides as far as the 2021 budget versus actual. But property taxes, I'm extremely happy to report, are coming in $2.3 million over what we have budgeted at the 3% growth. As we've discussed, the state-based student cost EFA funding is under budget because of the decrease in students, which we think will be a temporary decrease in the student counts. The teacher salary fringe allocation is slightly over budget. That's based on our final teacher counts for this year. The fringe allocation over budget is that number that always gets adjusted by the State Budget and Control Board in October. Very difficult to predict. Don't want to overestimate it. So we use the initial allocation for planning the budget. And then if we receive additional funds, we're able to pick it up in the next year's budget. I mentioned the teacher salary on the state aid to classrooms. That was a small change. That's the pot that paid the 4% cost of living last year. And then interest, we mentioned, is under, and then a few small miscellaneous items I combined. The last amount, this is the teacher step increase for this year. When I prepared this, we had not received it. We have received it now. So our amount was $872,086 on the teacher salary step, basically reimbursed us. So the total over budget is $3,618,543. The increase to the general fund to maintain the 19% fund balance is $1,251,000. So I'm recommending a transfer of $2,366,928. And that's estimates based on last week. So that number's probably already changed a little bit, but I think these are as close as we can get to that 1% differential on the budget to actual. As far as the transfers, I think you will see, you've seen these items consistently. These are items that we have not built into the general fund, but we've been fortunate enough to be able to use this year and transfer to cover them. The first one is the Media Center collections. There is the state requirement on the number of books, publication dates. It's a process every year. So we estimate $8 per student. Mr. Spittle allocates that out to every media center in the district. And then they're able to update their collections annually. Some of our schools are still at the just meets compliance. Some are a little bit over, but we're not up here as far as compliance. He and I discussed it the other day. This just keeps us meeting compliance for state requirements. We did move to an added ebook collection last year, and so he wanted me to share. He would probably split this. Part would be to update the ebook collection. Part would be hardbound books in the libraries.
And the state requirement doesn't specify paper versus electronic?
It does not. It does not. The next item is for curriculum, software, instructional materials for the Fort Mill Virtual Academy, working with Dr. McQuay. And originally, we thought that was going to be a very large ask. But where we ended up with the 550 students, she has worked with her teachers and estimated what she needs to purchase for the Virtual Academy next year, and that's the $55,000. The next item you have seen for several years is the school small capital purchases, the $250,000. We have already received the request. We've been working on prioritizing those, working with the principals, making sure that's still their priorities. This is a great benefit for our schools, and I can't tell you how appreciative they are to be able to add some of the smaller dollars. These are generally things that are too small to go in a bond referendum plan. I usually tell the principals, do not exceed $10,000. So it's your smaller type of items that they request. But it's a great benefit for them because these are things that they can't afford to purchase out of their school budget, which is based on the $100 per student. These are things that are a couple $1,000s that would, it might be student desk chairs. There's just a whole lot of different things, and it varies year to year. So it's not a set allocation per school. It's just based on the needs of that school in that next year. And we try to accommodate as many of those requests as we can that kind of fit our direction for this funding. But it just varies year to year by school. But they are very appreciative of that. The next item would help with the 40 new teachers. Some of those need new classroom curriculum. It's a set of materials to be consistent with other teachers that teach the same grade level. So it's a set amount per those teachers that might be going into a new classroom that would not have those materials already. And so I've been working with Peter Olinger on that, and he's working with the schools on which of those teachers need new classroom setups. The next item we had last year, middle school athletics. They are funded, they have a small equipment budget, but in a year where you need to do, let's say, football uniform helmet replacement is very expensive. So this would help their working on their request. So we haven't allocated this out by school, but once again, it varies depending on which school needs replacement uniforms for which teams. But this helps subsidize what we're giving for middle school athletics. in addition to the $100 fee that the students pay that covers the coaching stipends. So we, once again, just with middle school athletics, our goal is to break even with that program. And then the next one, you saw this last year. This is the effect of adding Catawba Ridge High School. It is going to take us a couple years when we bring on the full cost of all of the coaches for a full high school, but we spread those students out over 3 high schools instead of 2. So it's going to take us a while for the growth in students to catch up to fully support the level of coaches we have now with 3 high schools versus 2 high schools. So I'm estimating this at year end, we would be short about $65,000. That's less. I think last year we were short about $85,000. So we're making some progress with our growth in students. And then the last item we touched on is $1.8 million. I would recommend that we put in the contingency fund. And my thinking was that this would help us if we were in a situation next year where we did not have that level of student enrollment. So where our base student cost, our EFA revenue, once again, did not come in at the level that we budgeted, we would have this to go to. And of this $1.8 million, $872,000 of it is that teacher step money. So we're basically taking that and setting it aside to help us next year.
If that happened, wouldn't we have some extra balance, general fund balance to help as well?
We do.
If what happened?
If we didn't have as many students, your budget doesn't change, but you wouldn't necessarily need going to the general 1.2 either, right?
No,
1.2.
because you've already hired the teachers.
We've already hired the teachers. I mean, we have general fund balance, but our general fund expenses wouldn't decrease.
You could use the 3% if you wanted to. You could go down to the 16% instead of the 19%.
We could. We could use the general fund balance. That, though, I would recommend as a last resort.
Yeah.
That's the question that the bond rating agencies always ask. And they always want to know, what are you projecting your general fund increase, your general fund balance will be at year end?
So 16 is I'll call it our legal minimum.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's not what we want to be at.
No, I get that. there are multiple paths to.
Yeah.
There
that's
are.
what it's for,
There are.
is if you get in trouble so that we
Right.
don't default.
Right. We'll still pay the bills and the lights will stay on, I think, and all that. So,
Without taking a loan from the state.
yes.
I think it will be interesting to see what our number is. I don't think,
I do
100%
too.
of those folks that did, that did made alternative arrangements last year come back for this year. But it will. But you got a lot of. I mean, you look at everything going on, townhomes after townhome after townhome. Michelle, I'm assuming that those aren't necessarily. Maybe our numbers were wrong. Maybe the number of students in those townhomes probably are increase on our projections on the impact fee
The state
study.
alone would tell you that they're going up.
And our impact fee collections says, we're
Are steady.
building 60-plus units a month, I think, coming online.
We're very confident we're going to get back to that student enrollment count. It's just the uncertainty, is it going to happen all in 1 year? Or 2
In some ways,
years?
you kind of hope that it doesn't, just so that you have a chance to
Breathe.
regroup and breathe a minute.
Yeah.
So, is this an action item?
It is not. So what we typically do, we discuss this with you. I will put it as an action item on June the 8th with the approval of the budget and the public hearing on the budget. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is a curriculum update. Ms. McGinn, are you going to do this, or?
I'm going to tag team
Okay.
again on this. Good evening. Let's see. So curriculum update part 2. I think on your agenda it's the curriculum update and plans for summer activities. They're kind of merged because they kind of just they go hand in hand. So first of all, we just got our notification of when our Cognia accreditation engagement review is going to be November 7th through the 10th of 2021. Remember, this was a review that was to happen this year, but we were given a waiver for that and the strategic plan, and we're doing those all together, and we'll have that wrapped up and have that review in November. Usually this is a 4-day visit from a team, but they are still saying that there is just going to be a virtual review, which is thrilling to the teachers and the principals and to us. What does it mean then? So we'll be given an eProve workspace assigned to us to upload evidence. We'll get a lead evaluator and review team from around the country that are trained in looking at district evidence and determining where we stand with the different assurances and the performance standards. And then we'll just be getting ready to host this remote review, which you will hopefully be able to participate in. So what do you expect for this? Again, we'll be going over this again and again and again and bring you into some of the decision making as far as the strategic planning and direction and all those kinds of things. But just want to make sure everybody begins to start thinking in this kind of language. So there'll be a Zoom platform, there'll be groups, district leadership, parents, teachers, stakeholders, board members, students. This time there'll be no observations conducted, which last time they did the Elliott, the engagement observations. This time they'll kind of determine that based on survey and other information they glean from the information that we upload, the evidence that we upload, and the interviews. The interviews of these stakeholder groups are going to be crucial in what they find and want to, the suggestions they may make and the commendations they may give us. So that's kind of a little thing. I wanted to make sure everybody had that on their calendar for next school year. So we're calling this Liftoff Summer 2021, and it's kind of, pardon the pun, it's going to be out of this world, and we'll have some folks talk about that. What you have here, and the reason those schools are up on the slide, is that those are the host sites for our summer programs in the district. And then Winthrop University always hosts our Summer Starts program. Summer Starts program is a gifted and talented program for our middle school students. This year it runs, it's been pushed back to June 28th through July 16th. Last year it was canceled. This year they're going to try to have the program. It's going to be a half-day program to accommodate better distancing. We're excited about it. We did not have live auditions, but students had to submit electronic auditions. They were adorable, by the way. Students singing and dancing and submitting their art portfolios and their rationale and in reading their writing about their feelings about their art and what motivates them and what inspires them was really heartwarming. So the program, I haven't talked about this in a while, but just so you know, Winthrop does this for Rock Hill, Fort Mill, Clover, Lancaster, and this year they've added private schools and homeschool students. They could audition and submit their portfolio or their information to Winthrop. Winthrop, of course, grades those and makes recommendations. Our schedule will be in the afternoon. We'll be with Rock Hill students. This is a half-day program. We have 22 students returning in grades 6 through 7th and 8th graders. Of course, last year they didn't get to participate at all, but some of the 8th graders may have been there as a 6th grader. We had 111 that submitted their auditions. 36 were selected for a total of 58. That's the most we've sponsored. We used some of the money since nobody could go anywhere. We all kind of chipped in, and Ms. Lordo's helped us to kind of round out that number since they were able to, and we are able to send more students than we've been able to send before, and we're excited about that. They're thrilled. And that's just the different areas: dance, drama, visual arts, music, and instrumental music. So at this time, we'll talk about summer plans for academic recovery. We are in the process of finalizing the academic recovery plan that Ms. Lordo referred to. Our team has been working on that, and we think that it'll align nicely with the things that have been identified for ESSER 3, and it'll meet the criteria, and we'll wrap that up and submit that. It's due May 28th, so at the end of the week. So that plan is almost ready to go. Mike?
Good evening. I'm going to give you an update on the different programs we're going to have at the middle and high schools this summer. I'll also highlight some of the activities we have planned with teachers that we'll be doing this summer. So each of the high schools will be doing a high school academic camp. These are going to be focused on reading and math skills, really looking at the gaps that they may have, the students may have, and the essential standards for those courses. It's going to be set up a little bit differently at each school. At Catawba Ridge and Fort Mill High School, it's going to consist of rising 9th grade students to help get them prepared for high school. And Nation Forward is doing that as well, but they're also going to have some opportunities for upperclassmen as well. So just a little bit of a different setup, but really focusing on the math and reading skills that students may have missed. So you see the dates up there. These are half-day programs for the high schools. Springfield Middle School, they're actually the host of the district summer school for middle school. Those are for students who have failed to meet the promotion requirements at the end of the year. So that's for all schools, but Springfield is doing this program on the screen. Additionally to that, it's called Academy Ignite. It'll be for 10 days, all day long, and the focus is on skill gaps in ELA and math. So when we talk about skill gaps, that's not necessarily what they might be missing right now in a class, but the foundational skills that are preventing them from having success now and also down the road. It's really hard during the school year to find time to work on their skill gaps because you're trying to work on the standards for that current course. So we're excited to offer some of these programs where we can look at the foundational skills that may be missing to help provide support.
Dr. Waisness, do you have
Yes.
an idea of the number of students either at the high school or the middle school level that we're talking about?
No, we're still working on the numbers to see. Springfield is going to have the largest program, but I'm not sure the exact numbers yet.
Are we talking dozens, hundreds? Do you have a ballpark of how much capacity we have?
Probably in the 100 range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ballpark.
Yes. And that would be at each of the schools, that range of students for each of the schools. For the high schools and then Springfield, yes.
And then another 100-ish or whatever at middle school. Okay.
Yes, correct. Also, each of the middle schools, they're going to restart their different orientation programs for the rising 6th graders. We were not able to do that last year. I think they did, we did virtual experiences for students. This year they're going to be face-to-face. The schools are still working on the dates and times for those. For rising 6th graders, I believe some of the schools are working on virtual experiences for the new 7th and 8th grade students that are coming to our district.
I would hope we would also, I mean, even if we have a 7th grader that's not new, but they were virtual during their 6th grade year, they've never set foot in the school either, really.
Right. I think when they're planning with those students in mind. So students that may be new to the building as well.
And then there's always the new in town.
Right.
But, yeah, okay.
So those are some of the things we have going on at the middle and high schools. Also, we'll be doing some curriculum work that is kind of in progress, and some of these will be just during the summer. We've talked about the new social studies standards, so we've had teachers in working on them. The middle school teachers have been in several times, and we'll be meeting again one more time to finish the collaboration on the new standards. The high school social studies standards weren't quite as big of a change, but we'll have those teachers coming in June, representative from each of the core social studies areas in high school to collaborate and work on the social studies standards. So we're excited with that. We had the high school world language teachers here a couple weeks ago, a couple teachers from level 1 and level 2 for Spanish and French to try to come to an agreement on some curriculum that they teach their students. So the way that the different schools teach it are set up differently, but we came to an agreement on guaranteed content or guaranteed curriculum for each of the level courses. So in Spanish 1, regardless of the school you are at, you're going to get this. In Spanish 2, you're going to get this, French 1 and French 2. So the timeline might not be exactly the same based on the way they teach it, but we have come to an agreement on these are the minimum standards you're going to get, and then the goal is to move that up to levels 3 for AP is kind of the same because it's AP courses, but that's been a challenge we've had in our district is the world language and not having opportunities for the teachers to get together. And the ones that were able to make it, they really, really seem to enjoy it, just getting that chance to talk to their colleagues from the other schools. And finally, we are just starting to work on selecting possible textbooks for some of our high school math courses. The state, they did the process completely different this year. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, but usually we would be doing this in September of a year. And there's a textbook caravan where all the vendors are and the teachers get to come and learn about all the different selections. They're not doing any of that, and they're about 7 or 8 months behind schedule. So we are putting a group of teachers together. We are planning our own caravan type experience where the teachers can come here and look at the different materials, attend presentations virtually from the vendors to hopefully select a district selection for the different classes that are up. And then, so that's an interesting question. So we asked the State Department, because it's so late, it's just a completely different timeline. We said, is this for 2021, 22 or 2022, 23? And they said, well, we're not sure yet. So we don't know. It all depends, I guess, on what ends up getting funded. And usually it's done in September, October for the following school year. So we were kind of hesitant getting the teachers involved. We were wondering, do we want them to be involved and kind of waste their time if it doesn't end up getting funded? But we came to the conclusion that we want them to be part of the process, even if it doesn't get funded, because they're the experts, they're the ones that need to have the selection. But we kind of put the caveat in there. We said, and we're working on this right now as we speak, we're going to say, we want you to be a part of this, we need your expertise, but just be aware that it may not be funded by the state.
Certainly not for this coming year.
Right.
Okay. I hope not for this coming year. I mean, really, that's awfully late to change
Yes.
the textbook
Right.
and the plan.
We're hoping the 3rd grade and 7th grade social studies gets funded because those are brand new courses for next year, and we've already selected the books for that. So we're really hoping those get funded. If the ones that are on the list now don't get funded until 2022, 23, that would be fine as well. So those are some of the things we have going on at the middle and secondary level. Do you have any questions?
I asked mine as we went, sorry.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Mr. Ollinger.
Good evening. I'm excited to share some exciting things going on in the elementary world. Just like Dr. Wakesness said, we are, as well at elementary, we are doing a lot of work with the social studies standards. We have gotten through 3 of our 6 grade levels. We brought in a representative from every grade level, so we had a rep from all 11 schools, and they've come together and worked on a content and pacing guide for that, and they really enjoyed it. Since we've gone to 11 schools, to bring a rep from every school, they were able to share a lot of ideas and thoughts on things and be able to build a plan going forward. So those have gone really well. So we finished kindergarten today, and we have 3 more grade levels left to go before the end of the year. So that's some of the curriculum work we're doing right now. And then in the summer, we have some things planned. We have some professional development planned for writing instruction and talking with our principals and literacy coaches. This is just, I think, a desire to give some more, for lack of a better word, intense instruction on our units of study for writing. So that'll be an option for K-5 teachers across the district. We're going to offer, basically, it's going to be a 2-day training that we're going to offer 2 different times. So it's kind of like a cohort. So if a teacher's unavailable at this time, there is another date option for another 2-day training for them, and that's going to be presented by our district elementary literacy coaches. So we're excited to be able to provide those teachers that option this summer. Second, we pulled a gifted and talented focus group this year. We had a school representative from each of the 11 schools, and we've talked a lot about kind of how we can help strengthen our program, what do we need. And out of that, those focus group meetings came that we need to provide some additional training for our GT students. and it kind of helped meet their needs. So I've had 4 experienced GT teachers. We actually met this afternoon to kind of work on that planning. We are going to again offer a 2-day professional development training. There'll be a day for literacy, 1 day for math instruction at the elementary level. We do serve 3rd through 5th graders and gifted and talented in those areas of literacy and math. So that's why it's for those specific grade levels and for those 2 subject areas. Right now, it says we're going to offer it 2 times. We're kind of offering 1 date, and if we have a large sign up, we'll add a 2nd date if we need to. And again, we have 4 of our teachers that have done a lot of great work in our district through that program are going to teach that for us. So we're excited to do that. Summer. I want to talk to you about kind of how summer looks. It's coming from a lot of different areas, a lot of different pots of money. So I'm going to try to explain this, and then I'm going to have Amber will come up shortly to. We themed it this year, and I'm going to let her. It was her kind of her awesome idea, so I'm going to let her kind of share that and make it exciting for the kids. But we have a lot of different options for students in the district for elementary. The first, we do have our ESY for special education students to work on IEP goals, and those may be for goals that that's for students who may have trouble retaining the information over a period of time. It helps just reinforce if there's any lag that they don't lose the progress that they made. And the funding source there is IDEA and as well as state funds. The next program is Lunch and Learn. This is for kindergarten through 4th graders, and you may remember that through a Springs Foundation grant as well as the district, but Springs has helped support a backpack program for students who have been identified and have accepted where they are able to take backpacks home, full of food home for the weekend that may not otherwise have those food items. They get that backpack throughout the school year. So when this program started a few years ago, it was to continue to provide those students food options. So they would come to school in the summer for those few weeks, and then they would have breakfast as well as lunch, and then they still take a backpack home of food for the weekend. So we still offer that. So Springs, we kind of work with Second Harvest. They're the ones that kind of gather the food materials and provide those bags for us. And again, Springs has been a great help with us, helping provide that grant for the weekend backpack program, as well as helping support our summer Lunch and Learn program. So it's also funded through the Foundation for Middle Schools has helped support that, as well as we allocate school district funds to help support as well. So the schools, they get seats for that program based on those students that have those backpacks. So we do look at like a poverty index per school to allocate the number of seats for those schools. So some schools may get more seats than others. So those, go ahead.
Can I ask on that, so the summer feeding program, not specific to these students, but the summer feeding program in general, is that intended to continue this year as well? Yes. So then this is additional for those students who qualify, and they also receive the backpack for the weekend in addition to what is offered for the throughout the week.
Correct.
Yes.
I believe we're still pending approval. The last time I talked with Tammy, we were pending approval on that, but that was her plan.
Okay. Okay.
And we communicated today about this, Tammy and I, and we believe that these students would get those meals would be covered for those students attending our summer program for breakfast and lunch as well. That's our hope and understanding. So, and if students turn down that opportunity, then those schools have that slot to allocate. So each school has like a waiting list of students who they feel may need those academic support. So yes, they're getting breakfast and lunch, but they're also getting a full day of reading, writing, and math instruction. So we also have summer reading camp, which with the Read to Succeed law requires that if we have students that meet a not met 1 on the South Carolina Ready, that they would be required to go to summer camp or risk retention if they do not have a good cause exemption, which there's 6 or 7 good cause exemptions for that. So we kind of pre-identify students based off STAR testing that we could predict that they would not pass. So our principals and our schools have been working with those families and letting those families know that this may be an option for them. But if they do pass, they still have that spot. It's already allocated for them, and it's going to be 15 total days of reading instruction. Now, I probably should have started with that. The All of our summer programs will run July 6th through July 29th. It's 15 total days from 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock.
Do you know
So-
how many are, I'll call it qualified for that?
For the summer reading camp, right now we have 3 classes that are in, I think roughly about 8 students a class. Amber, about that, we'll have 6 to 8 students in those particular classes. So then we get a state allocation for summer reading camp. And then we have a program called Summer Scholars, and this started a couple of years ago. The district gets Title IV funds that you could use to support students. It's supposed to help provide a well-rounded education as well as technology instruction as well as healthy students. So it's kind of a broad thing. This is, I think, our 3rd year with this. We have used it to further provide summer programming for students at Riverview for students who qualify for Tier 3 and Tier 4 intervention. So we looked at kind of need again with potential COVID slide, but we also had some Title I funds with a quarter of last school year being kind of closed down and gone virtually. We had funds that we have reallocated to provide additional classes for students who are Title I targeted at Sugar Creek and Riverview, to provide those students in those schools some additional support. So we were funding that through Title IV and Title I. So I know meeting with Ms. Chinchilla and Ms. Greitz, they were excited to be able to provide that additional support to those our 2 Title I schools in the district.
But only available to students from those 2 schools?
Yes, ma'am. Because those are Title I funds, and we target Riverview and Sugar Creek are our Title I schools, so they can only be the only ones that can participate.
If we had a student who needed this support that was at a different school, would we be able to fund it and add them into the program?
Good question. So what happens is through the lunch and learn slots, a lot of those students, for whatever reason, they're out of town, they spend it with another family through the summer, or they just have other plans, they don't take those slots. So each school knows that they submit us who would initially qualify for the backpack program or through lunch and learn, and then it usually opens up slots for students at those other schools that need to attend. So we have a lot of different kind of pockets here, but usually we're able to get in the students.
And I get the funding, obviously, is tied to Title I and all that. I just want to make sure that if we've got, a small number of students elsewhere, that we try to find those same opportunities for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I believe when Amber Smith comes up and talks about the whole thing, a lot of these classes, they're going to get that literacy and math instruction, but we also use some of those Title IV funds we're using to pay for a PE teacher, a technology and STEAM teacher, as well as the nurse who will serve all those programs because they can fund well-rounded and the technology support and the healthy environment for students. So there'll be similar services and experiences even though they may be in a specific funded program. And then we have an ESL program that's paid through Title III. It's multilingual learners with beginning English proficiency. So Amber's been working with the ELL teachers to identify those students, and that is across the district, I believe, correct, Amber? Yes. So that's how we're able to, again, provide additional support for those students over the summer. And then this isn't part of the actual summer camp, but we do, in addition, for a summer program, we do have Countdown to Kindergarten. This is through the Early Learning Partnership. Amber and I have been meeting with them and coming up with those schools. So we're given several slots, and this is for incoming kindergarten students with risk factors that could impact their academic success. So these students were screened. We use some of the things coming through Power School when students register. The schools that were able to have slots available to them were able to hire teachers, and they will actually go out and they visit the children and work with the children and the parents prior to the school year starting. And the purpose of that too is a teacher is given 5 students that they visit over the summer. Then that student then goes to that teacher's classroom. So they already have that relationship and they have already kind of started that going down that road. So we've had it in the past. We're able to get it back this year. We kind of funded it through some local grant funding in the past. It had kind of a different name, but we're going to go back to the calling it Countdown to Kindergarten this year. So, And then I believe Dr. Maziarz is going to come up in a moment to talk about specifics for ESY, and then I'm going to let Amber explain some of the fun theme that we have for summer camp that we're very excited about. That's going to encompass all of these things. But if you have any questions about things we have going on this summer or the summer programs, I'm happy to answer those for you.
I have one.
Sure.
It made me think about it, the countdown to kindergarten. I don't know who the question is for. There's been talk about 4-year-old kindergarten, you know, federally, statewide. I don't actually know where any of that stands. Does anybody
That's
know
probably-
anything?
Yeah, and I'm not sure, Ms. Lordo, if did they pass the 4-year-old funding? We
For
believe
this
it's,
coming year?
yeah, but, you know, there were 17 districts that did not receive funding because of our demographics. We were one of those. It's in one version, so realistically speaking, we can't, you know, I mean, next year we just can't grow 4-year-old classes everywhere. So we will have to, and many districts are gonna be, well, at least those 17 will probably be in that boat, but, so that's kind of where we are, but big picture is, it's a good thing. I mean, we want it,
Yes.
and
We just want to be able to plan for it.
that's right,
Okay.
but we didn't want to hear about it at 11 o'clock and have to implement it at 12, you know, but, that's typical for this year, but, so, that's, the long-term plan is that it will, and it was in the budget and passed before the virus hit, you know, and that went away, so, the legislature's serious about doing it, which is good, but that's kind of, we're in
So
limbo.
we don't know yet what we may be required or strongly suggested to offer next year yet.
Not yet. You know, we've got some 4-year-old offerings we already do. We'll deal with it.
Maybe
We'll come up
expand
with a
some.
plan.
Okay.
But it would be problematic for both our budget and our space.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
It'd be nice to know it about 4 months ago where we could
Right.
rent a
have
big
plan.
box somewhere and figure it out, but, this is typical, but.
Maybe,
Thank you. Dr. Maziarz.
maybe more big boxes to rent.
No, you know, and I said problematic, but it's not it's not impossible to do. We always are very good about doing those types of things. We can figure it out. We've got a tremendous staff who is good at that.
Thinking on our feet. Yeah.
That's right, yes, ma'am.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about extended school year. Extended school year is not a new program for us. We've been doing it about 45, 46 years. Not that I've been overseeing it that long, but it is required by law under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which was implemented in 1975. So we serve anywhere from 3-year-olds to 21-year-old students during our extended school year program. The actual number of students does change each year. It has to be decided upon by an IEP team. The past couple of years, we have averaged between, I'd say, 100 to 125 students with special needs. We will have our final count on June 11th because that is when the report to the state is due, which will determine our funding for this summer. Right now, and I like to say, generally, our services are going to be provided July 6th through July 22nd. However, everything is very individualized, so there may be students who are getting less services, there may be students who are getting more services. But the primary time we will be providing services is during that time frame. Most of our students will also be receiving services at Pleasant Knoll Elementary. However, some students, because of medical conditions, we might need to serve them at home. Some students, we have determined they might be going to a new school next year, so we want them to get familiar with that school, so we might be serving them at another school. But for the most part, they will be at Pleasant Knoll Elementary. I did skip the what, so I'm going to back up. So during extended school year, we are required to either provide specialized instruction and/or related services. So yes, the majority of our students will be getting instruction in their reading, writing, and math. But there are also students who might be working on their communication skills and get speech therapy. There might be students working on their motor skills and be getting OT or PT. And there might be students who are working on social skills or their behavior, so they might be working with a mental health counselor or a behavior interventionist. So there's a lot of things going on with a lot of different students. And like I said, it is because of the Individuals with Disability Education Act.
Is it usually an hour or a half a day or a full day?
It very much depends. It's very individualized. Typically, we're doing an hour and a half session. So there might be a student who's only coming for an hour and a half, and that might be solely dedicated to reading. There might be a student who really needs to work on reading, writing, and math and throw in some speech therapy and some social skills. They might be there a half day. But most of our students are getting, I would say, an hour and a half to 3 hours a day during that time.
Two areas.
Like Mr. Olinger kind of said, the thing you need to keep in mind about extended school year is, one, it is very individualized, but really this is not about closing the achievement gap. Students are not eligible for extended school year because they're behind their peers. In the very nature of special ed, most of our students are behind their peers academically because they have a disability, which is what makes them eligible to begin with. This is really at us looking at data and seeing that without services during the summer, the students will regress to a point that it will take a very long time for those to recoup skills. Most students, you will see a summer slide, but usually with the majority of students who come back, they are able to regain that once they're in a structured classroom and their teachers go over things within a couple weeks. If we're not seeing the recoupment of skills within like a 6-week period, usually we kind of use that data to say they definitely need services during the summer. We also have some kids who, due to the nature and severity of their disability, that might be impacting them, their maintenance of attained skills. So some of our students, just by the very nature and the severity of their disability, are eligible. There are some students who are at a critical point of instruction, so we also look at that. If they are introducing a new skill and haven't shown that they're mastering it yet, we drill it in there during the summer. And then, it being special ed, they have a category called special circumstances, which is the catch-all for anything that we really need to look at. That might be a student had a medical condition that caused them to be out for a significant period of time. Obviously, with COVID, that would be applicable to all students. But during a normal school year, we do have some kids who, whether they have cancer or something else, they're out for a long time. So we will look at their attendance amongst other things. So that is ESY wrapped in like a very few minutes. Any questions? I could sit up here and spout some federal regulations and case law, but I think what Ms. Smith is about to talk about is a little more fun than that.
And you said most of it's at Pleasant Knoll Elementary, and that's just because you centralized it there?
Correct.
But if they have a certain circumstance that needs to be at one of the schools where their equipment is or whatever, then they would be there.
In previous years, we had it at Riverview Elementary, just so we could even centralize services more. However, last summer, when we were trying to social distance as much as possible and spread out students, we decided we needed to break away from some of the other summer programs. So Mr. Allen graciously offered to host us, and we've just decided that as we continue to grow, we need more space. And I will say that, just because they're participating in extended school year does not mean they're not eligible for any other summer program we're offering. Okay. All right. Well then.
All right, you're next. Apparently with the fun presentation.
Yes.
This is what happens when you give the elementary school teacher a clicker. So I'm going to talk about elementary summer programs, which you've heard a little bit about. I'm going to focus specifically on those 4. If you think about the chart that Mr. Olinger put up, take away Amy's ESY and take away Countdown to Kindergarten, the 4 in the middle is what we're going to talk about. So we have run Lunch and Learn, Summer Reading Camp, Summer Scholars, and ESOL has historically been an after-school program, but COVID kind of ruined that for this year, so we decided to move it into a summer program. But we've run these for years. And one of the things that we noticed, especially this past year when we had the opportunity to do Academic Recovery Camp, which was the state's alternate version of Summer Reading Camp, it expanded it. We realized that there were some programs that were running concurrently that really could be blended together financially, just ease. As we talked about the different kinds of students that might qualify, you could think of a kid who might have food insecurity and have a lunch, be part of the backpack program. Might be a 3rd grader who has not met 1, has an IEP, or is in tiered intervention, and is also an English learner. You could be all 4, which means you would actually get invited to 4 separate programs and your parents probably have no idea which of those 4 programs are, or they probably think the letter is the same thing anyways, and we just keep sending them the same letter over and over again, even though they were 4 separate programs. And that actually happened. We had some kids who got multiple letters because they qualified for lots of different things. And so what we realized was, let's see where we can combine and make some things make sense. And so what it allows us to do is use our resources better so that we've got one student nutrition site. We don't have to run twice as many staff members for the cafeteria. We've got bus routes all landing in one spot, just some things like that. And so got this idea started, and we said, well, with this particular summer, given the calendar, the way that it falls, we are probably working against a challenge for students to come to summer programs that we've never really had a challenge with in the past. So how do we get kids here? Because we can't really help them if they're not here. And they've got a little bit of a shorter summer, and so there's just, how do we do that? So the first thing I did is I looked at EAB, which is our research partner, and I asked them, I said, find me all the research you can on summer programs, and they did. So we got pages and pages of summer research, and we went through all that, and one of the first things they said was make it fun. I was like, oh, research says make it fun? I'm on board. So we made it fun, and so we talked about it, we thought about how can we blend these programs together, and that's where Space Camp was born. So our summer program this summer is called Space Camp. Everybody, whether you're going to one of those 4 programs, you're going to Space Camp. And so that makes the communication to parents a lot easier. It's one program that we're talking about. The kid gets off the bus and we'll shuttle them to the hallway where they need to go. Mom doesn't need to know if they're in Lunch and Learn or if they're in, that doesn't matter to mom. She just needs to know where to send the kid. So what we've done is we leveraged the Mars rover landing and Perseverance to call it summer camps. We had lots of stuff going on. And so you can see, whichever way you look, we renamed each of the programs for the summer. So Lunch and Learn is Apollo, Summer Reading Camp is Mercury, Summer Scholars is Gemini, and ESOL is Voyager. So each of them will have a space theme, and they will run in their separate hallways. We happened to be hosting it at Riverview. It was really purely accidental. I would like to say that that was really on purpose and take credit for that, but it was just accidental. But we did say that what we'll do next year is we'll start moving it from school to school. So we've got 11 built-in elementary themes. So next year we might have oceans themes if we take it to the Sugar Creek Sharks, and we'll work our way around the district. So we've got 11 years of themes planned. We're ready. We just got to come up with better column names each time. So the kids are all coming to Space Camp, and what was really cool is when we sent the letters home, that's what it said. It said, you are invited to Space Camp, an exclusive camp that not everybody gets to go to. But again, to your question, Ms. Beers, if they qualify in one of those categories or we have spots available, kids get scooped up all the time. Lunch and Learn is our most flexible program to be able to add kids into. So we had a student who took her letter home, brought back the little enrollment form. She was so excited. She showed her teacher and she said, look, I got invited to Space Camp. So this kid's really excited. She doesn't know this is summer school. This is Space Camp. I got invited to Space Camp. She said, you know, like Miss Frizzle and the Magic School Bus. So you know what I did that afternoon? I went and bought a Miss Frizzle costume because we're going to make this kid's dreams come true. So I will be Miss Frizzle on July 6th. Come on over to Riverview. You can see it in action. Full skirt and everything. But that's the idea, is we want kids to come have fun. While they're having fun, they will be doing literacy, math, STEAM, eating, recess, all the things they want to do, but really maximizing our resources so that they're having a good time. So that is our plan. We have 3 planned guest speakers right now, virtual guest speakers, because we're still being safe. One, we leveraged our partnership with Discovery Ed. So we have Daisha Jones, who's going to come in and do a STEAM activity with us. My favorite sentence I've ever written in my life, I wrote to NASA, and so I'm emailing back and forth with NASA right now, which is really fun. So we're going to try to get an astronaut to Skype in with us. So we'll have an astronaut. And then we also have a former Fort Mill graduate who recently graduated from Clemson and who will be joining Space Force. And so he's going to come talk to our students and tell them that Space Force is a thing. He said most grown-ups don't know what it is, so we're going to get the kids excited to find out about Space Camp, or Space Camp and Space Force. So we thank Heath Pratt for that. So he'll be coming online with us and inspiring students. So those are our programs. What questions can I answer about Space Camp?
You said it runs from when? The 6th through the?
6th through the 29th, Monday through Thursdays, no Fridays.
3 weeks, 4 weeks?
It's 4, it's 15 days. We dropped the first Monday because of the 4th of July, falling on the other side of that.
If you need the lizard Ms. Frizzle.
Yeah.
I might have somebody that has a bearded dragon.
Call me.
I mean, I think that's exciting because I'm guessing some of these kids may not have the opportunity to go to some of the cooler camps, you know, the Cherokees, the Thunderbirds, the Whitewater Centers and all that kind of stuff. So to be able to go to a camp, probably a really great opportunity for them to go to camp for 3 weeks this summer, and probably very helpful to the parents because this is one that doesn't cost them.
Doesn't cost them a
the same as
dime.
Some of those others.
And we feed them twice. And I absolutely agree with that. That is a huge deal for a lot of kids. And so our responsibility is to make sure that it actually does feel like space camp, even though there's going to be some summer school involved with that. We do want it to still feel like space camp. So that's on us to do that.
But I think that's important too. You know, our teachers and staff work so hard during the school year, and it's when you have a shortened summer and they're not getting their anticipated break, we want them to be rejuvenated before they start in August again. So I think by having this camp and being excited about it and having a camp mentality as opposed to an education-focused summer school will help keep it fresh for not only the students but the teachers too.
Yeah, we're excited to be able to do it. So we've got a good group coming.
Great job.
All right, well, I'm going to stay here. Karen, we'll just pass this back and forth and I'll just have her.
Hi, how's it going? I'm not sure why I was invited here because I'm not talking about a summer program, but but they told me to come, so I came. No, I think really Amber and I just wanted to give you an update about where we were with the MTSS process, and I came earlier this semester and talked a little bit about our focus on SEL. So we thought, since we were talking about kind of curriculum and MTSS and things like support of students, that we could talk through where we were wrapping up this semester and kind of where we think kind of the planning we're going to do this summer for next year. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of on your agenda, it kind of goes back to curriculum updates. So we kind of went to summer plans and now we're back at curriculum.
Right, just because they're like, have Karen come since Amber was here anyway, instead of being all disjointed on the agenda. So the one on the right up on the screen, that castle model, we spent quite a bit of time last time I was here kind of outlining what that really looks like. The one on the left is the 3 tiers of what a good solid MTSS program looks like. And what I like about this triangle is that it breaks out not just academics, but it breaks out the social and the emotional too. So the part that we talked about, SEL, is really kind of that sliver, one of those slivers of what the full MTSS process program would look like. And so, you know, we've focused a lot on academics the first 3 years at the elementary school level in particular. And I know we're really proud of all the work that's gone into that side of it. And now are working our way on the other triangles. So just to remind you guys, because I know you don't live this the way we do with our triangle, the green at the bottom is for all students. All students get it, referred to as Tier 1. So just your general curriculum that's available to all students, your general support that's available to all students, not just academically, but through our support services, which you guys are very generous in giving, but even through guidance lessons and all of the other pieces that go into that. And then the yellow would be kind of considered Tier 2. So there are some concerns about the students. They're getting some interventions, but they may be group interventions. And then red are the students that are having, they're at most at risk. They're more intensive interventions. They're individualized to the student's needs. So you kind of work your way up. And one of the biggest things to keep in mind is just because you're in red, so to speak, or Tier 3, that doesn't mean that you're not also getting Tier 2 and Tier 1. It layers on the more you need. So in our MTSS committee this spring especially, we've met several times, and you know, when you take on a new initiative, it gets overwhelming when you start talking about all the different tiers and all the different things and how do you tackle all of them. So we actually broke into 3 subgroups, and one talked just about Tier 1, or the green part. Then we talked about the SEL screening pilot, which I shared a little bit last time. And then another group, that one really is more than just the screening pilot. It really was about assessment and use of data within the MTSS. And then tiers 2 and 3 is the intervention. So this is just a summary of what the subcommittees have come up with this semester, some essential components that we want to see in all of our tier 1, that we want all of our students to have, a good school-wide rules and expectations and classroom management, those strong student relationships, SEL instruction, and then the evidence-based intensive strategies, which we're going to work on low intensive strategies with teachers. As far as the screening pilot goes, just a quick update there. It's gone really well. I think the teachers have really enjoyed it. I'm in the middle of collecting some survey data from the teachers about their perceptions. And then starting next week, Peter, Amber, and I are doing some focus groups with them in order, and the administrators and others that were involved at the school level, to really get their insight as to whether or not that's something they want to continue. And then intervention, we've just been working on clarifying those, kind of aligning the language like we do with academic interventions to make sure we're, working the best we can to meet those needs at the tier 2 and tier 3 level. So kind of any questions about the spring stuff that we're wrapping up? No? Okay. And then,
and I think what's really important and a good reason to talk about MTSS right now, rather than, in addition to just being a good update, as we look toward the academic recovery plan for next year and things that we're using funding for, MTSS is instrumental in all of that. How are we supporting students in that COVID slide? What are we doing? MTSS is the process by which we do that. And the SEL component is so important for all of the things that students and teachers have gone through over the last year. It's a really great way to have that conversation and to focus on all learning being social emotional learning. And you can't really get to the academics if that social emotional piece is not there as well. Our goals for next year, the elementary process has been in progress for quite a while now, so we're really at the refine stage. So I jokingly say our goal for next year is goals. Sounds a little redundant, but our goal is to write better goals, is to make sure that we're writing goals for students and using the best progress monitoring data that we can to be able to determine if students are making progress and if additional supports are needed. So we'll be looking at both academic and social emotional behavioral goals at that time. Secondary, middle, and high school, our big plan this year was to work on secondary MTSS, and then we had other things that we were working on this year. So we'll be working next year to conduct a self-study needs assessment at each of the secondary schools to start determining where we are, what's already in place. We know we have interventions in place. It's now just getting that systematic process. So we've got to get a pulse check before we can move forward.
And I mean, I think that's so critical because I don't know that it's new, but it certainly became evident over the last year, the social emotional challenges, and I don't know, maybe because of the age, it's more evident in some of the older children, with some of the challenges. So,
A question here.
Sure.
Are we, it's been a long year, of course, there's a sense of, are we improving socially, emotionally over the last couple months? Is there anything you're seeing from your end of it? And
one, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it's a little hard to answer because we haven't been stagnant this year. Our expectations of kids have changed as the year has gone on, and it's different when you have 2/3 of your student body coming every other day, or not 2/3, because I guess elementary came back fairly early on, but I will tell you that since middle school and high school have been back 5 days a week, we have actually seen a big uptick in the needs of those students. I think the young ones, I think they're more adaptable anyway, and besides the first 4 weeks, this school year's pretty much been typical for them, minus the masks and all of this stuff. But for the middle school and high school students, they were gone for almost a year, doing an unusual schedule. And then we bring them in the spring semester, 5 days a week. All of a sudden, they're not used to that, right? So they don't quite have the stamina, and, you know, the expectations are there. And so we saw their stress levels go up, to be honest. And I'd like to think that we're starting to level out again. But I feel like we're going to have that wave again in August when we have our third virtual students come back to us,
And
right?
I think that's gonna be
Yeah.
that's a bigger transition
Yeah,
than the every other day
right,
to 5 days.
right.
Going from, you know, and it probably varied by household, but a lot of flexibility in schedules
Yeah.
in some of the virtual programs that are virtual
Right.
students compared to
Right.
what the expectations are gonna be.
And that's something we certainly have, you know, all my groups talk about, and in some respects, I'm glad we had this wave, and we're, you know, grateful that we were able to get back 5 days a week, because I feel like we get this wave of students in, and we kind of get them settled. We know there's another wave coming, but hopefully we'll, you know, not as many as it would have been if we had stayed, you know, staggered all year.
Thank you.
Questions?
I think that ends our presentation. Thank you for the team has shared their passion and their work, and it's tireless, and I cannot say enough wonderful things about them. They are a joy to work with every day.
I am really enjoying having these updates,
Yes.
this meet.
Absolutely.
In our meetings.
Absolutely.
So thank you for, I know it's a lot of work to put together, but thank you.
We've got another one next meeting, right, Ms. McGann? Yeah, it's small.
All right. We do have one more staff report, which will then lead into an action item, I think, kind of hand in glove.
All right, good evening. These are the first readings of two policies, the modification of two policies. The first one is JCLA, Instructional Staff Schedules and Calendars. G, what did I say, J? Okay, G, I apologize. GCLA, it's been a long night. So with this policy, we are just taking out the times at the bottom there. The student scheduled school day is as follows. So we're taking those times out. Really, it's so that we don't have to come to the board every time we switch the schedule by 5 or 10 minutes. And this would allow us to fluctuate that time.
I just want the record to reflect that I was not losing my mind.
Right.
Because I knew that there was a policy that had these
Yep.
listed, but could not find it last time.
There's two.
Well, hold on, there's actually one more. There's two, they're right. Is there any questions about that policy?
But so my question to that will be this. Are we going to replace that portion with an administrative rule that does not require board approval so that it is in our policies for staff and so on, potential staff to see and know?
We definitely can if that's
Well, we
something.
can.
that-
I would recommend we don't, but if the board wants it, we will. He's got to change it every time we change.
Well, the thing about this is about the hours that are listed here is about the student's scheduled day.
Correct.
And the policy is all about the staff day.
staff, yeah.
So if there's anything that needs to be changed or added back, what rule otherwise, in my opinion, it should be less about what time the students are there and what time the work hours expectations are for the staff.
And-
I don't know if that's somewhere else in a policy, in an HR policy.
Well, and it might come up with the same issues as the student time, because really the staff time is based on when the students are in school. And for example, this year, teachers and staff had to be there at the early so that students could go directly to the classroom. So if y'all wanted us to look into an administrative rule, if the board wanted us to do that, obviously we look in.
Somewhere I think it should be documented what the 7.5 hour parameters are, but I don't know that it needs to be in a policy.
Well,
Right?
and
Maybe a handbook is the right place to put it.
The
'cause it
School
varies.
Boards Association will, every time we redo the policies, will say that the student handbooks and the teacher employee handbooks carry the weight. If it's absent in policy, it still carries weight. So it'll be somewhere, we can put it here, but I mean, it really doesn't need, in the terms of contract.
It seems, we forget they're here as well, so if they are in one place, that might be a better solution.
I didn't forget, I knew they were there.
Well, we didn't abide by it then, we just, you know.
Oh, well, we did.
So we
but
did forget they
didn't
were there.
Because we said we did not want to amend, I think we actually did some kind of a, amended to those hours based on circumstance that kind of fell under that governor rule, so to speak.
Yeah, it might just be easier to, I mean, hire a superintendent, let the superintendent set the workday, and that's.
If it's in policy,
management.
we're gonna forget about it. I guess that's what I'm trying to avoid.
I like the idea of the handbook.
Yeah.
If we have an employee handbook, that seems to make sense to me. As opposed to a policy that lists student hours in a
Yeah.
Right.
staff work 7.5 hour day policy.
We can do it.
And the second policy is policy GDKA, support staff hours of work. And really it's the same modification. We're taking out that bottom section where it says the operating hours for a normal school day are as follows. And that gives us the flexibility to change those times.
So this is the first reading to scratch
correct.
the hours being listed, and then you'll come back next time for approval.
Yes, ma'am. That's it. Thank you.
Are you doing the?
I guess I can do, or yeah, Gray's not, I'm gonna do this one. School day, kinda, if you remember last, do you need copies of it? I have here if you need it. Okay, you got it on your computer. The same thing here, it's really, the problem with what we went through this year, was we were violating policy because we had all these things written into policy. So our thinking was, just to give us a little more flexibility, we would change the one word down there in the sentence, the district may consult with parents and faculty and obtain board approval before varying the length of the school day. Obviously, if it's a major change, and it's got a certain amount of trust here, if it's a major change, like we were changing significant amount of time or flipping elementary to later start, high school to earlier start, we would go to the public and the board and get input. This was hopefully this would allow us just to be nimble on our feet for something like we went through this year. So that's the reason for the recommended change from shall to may.
And if when this is adopted, things like transportation, where we need to spread them out 5 minutes or whatever, we usually still discuss it in these meetings.
Right.
I don't know that you do sometimes we do a survey, sometimes we don't do a survey, but I don't know that we officially gather feedback all the time, but you definitely get our input.
I think over the last, Tommy, you can help me, over the last 6 years, we probably changed the bus schedule a couple or 3 times, and it's always been 5 or 10 minutes. Right. And last year it was more significant because, and then going forward next year, we added it back where we got enough time for the elementary to drive back to pick up the middle. So, right, that's typically what we do.
But we don't do that often. That's based on more people moving to Fort Mill.
Exactly.
And more people drawn to Fort Mill to go to work, as opposed to everybody in our area going north or south. So I think we just have to be nimble, and we'll get to a saturation point where our bus times will be set, and they really won't fluctuate.
Yeah, I mean, as we add buses and we add routes, we don't have to, we were doing double routes, and then we weren't having to do double routes, and all that has just affected the duration in between that needed to be there. Okay. All right, so we did this one as a first reading. This is the second reading, so we do have an action item on this one, right?
Yep. Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of the administration for policy ID as noted.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend board policy ID as noted. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
That motion carries. And we are in need of an executive session to receive personnel recommendations, discuss legal matters, and to discuss an employee grievance request.
So without objection, we will move into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a great night.